Hello, everybody. My name is Mariusz Skrobała. Welcome to my channel CONSERVATIO on YouTube. And today, joining me from Italy, a leading voice of the Identitarian Movement in Italy, Andrea Ballarati. Hello, Andrea.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, it's the second time we've been talking,
Yeah.
so it's a great pleasure to have you here once more. I'm doing talks mostly in Polish on my channel, but you can find some interesting content in English there also. Talks with Martin Sellner or Guido Taietti or American monarchist Charles Coulomb, and of course, my first talk with Andrea. And Andrea, two main subjects today. You are being prosecuted for so-called hate speech, as the political left calls it. And the second, more positive thing is that you have published your first book in Italian about Reconquista and remigration. So let's start from the first subject, the political persecution. You are being accused of hate speech. What's going on? Do you think it's a kind of revenge of the political left that's in charge of the judiciary system in Italy, as we all know it, for the remigration summit that you organized last year in Milan?
So, yeah, the judiciary, as you said, the judiciary power in Italy, but not only in Italy, I think in every country in Europe, but also in the United States and other places, the left has gradually, in the decades after the Second World War, infiltrated the judiciary structures of power in these countries. Because, as we all know, the modern systems of government base themselves upon the three powers of judiciary, executive, and legislative. And the judiciary one is special because it allows you to decide what's acceptable and what's not inside democracy, inside this tripartite system. And in Italy, especially, it was a strategy by the political left. I know you loved the times of Italy during the 70s, 80s, 90s. And one of the main core strategies of the left was to infiltrate as many power structures as possible. And the judiciary was apparently their favorite. And we have seen a testimony of how politicized the system is in Italy in last week, essentially last week, because we had a referendum in Italy. I do not know if you've seen,
Yes, of course.
um, promoted by the right, but this referendum is particular because before that it was promoted by the left, and they wanted to essentially allow for a more impartial system. It's peculiar because the left rallied so hard against it, and the main thing that I wanted to bring here, to underline here, is not really the referendum result in itself, but the reactions of it. There was a video of judges in Naples chanting communist slogans right after they received the results of the referendum. And so we know for sure that, first of all, this referendum would have been something that would have limited their power. And second of all, that there is so many communist judges who have now no fear to expose themselves to cameras, stating essentially what they are, the communist leftists, however you want to define them. So starting from this essential knowledge that the Italian judiciary system, as rotten at its core, is politicized at its core, well, we cannot, me personally, I cannot exclude that seeing political prosecutions ramping up lately, not only against me. I want to remember the process that Salvini went through. 6 years was the let's say time they wanted to give him for essentially doing his job as an interior minister, because all he did was to stop an NGO boat which illegally brought people there to assess whether these people could enter or not. It's normal administration, but he had to go through years of legal processes, risking 6 years in jail. In my case, the everything started in 2023. So it's not really a reaction of the Remigration Summit, although it played a part, and it will become clear how when my explanation is done. So in 2023, it's the year I started with the identitarian world, with identitarian activism. Before that, I had my own cultural association, but I was mainly working in Italy, and it was really just a cultural association. We weren't really political. Yes, we were right wing. Yes, we were focusing on right wing politics and right wing history, but we weren't as politicized as we are now. And in 2023, that's when I started being political. I went to Vienna in July. I discovered the term remigration. I discovered the beauty of the identitarian world. And I instantly fell in love. I brought remigration to Italy. I brought the activism model to Italy. And we started the transition period of my group into an identitarian group, into an activism group. And so we did in 2025, essentially, but the idea came in 2024. We launched a campaign for remigration, which would end with the remigration summit, essentially. So we did actions, we did some public appearances, we did some relations, and all of that. My legal case started in 2023 because of some videos, some posts where they essentially, there is the sentences online, which unfortunately I do not have with me. I will do a paraphrasing, let's say, of these sentences. Essentially, what I said was that Belgium, France, Sweden, the United Kingdom are becoming majority migrant in their population. And it really shows that there is no time for us left to discuss, to I don't know, to be there and just talking about climate, talking about the economy and all these things, when essentially our populations, our composition is fading away in favor of a foreign population, of a foreign composition, which essentially means we are being replaced, our people are dying off. And this is the main existential threat for our countries, because it would mean we cease to exist. So it really boggles me how underrepresented this problem was until I brought it to Italy. There was no talk about ethnic replacement, no talk about remigration. Maybe because in Italy, the migrant crisis is not as hard, as bad as in Germany or in Sweden or in the United Kingdom or in France, but still we have problems in Milan, in the northern part of the country. And the last referendum shows that the ethnic vote played a huge part. There was 1.7 million self-declared Muslims that voted to that referendum and constituted a big part of it passing. So we know that the left is now using the ethnic vote that they created through their, mass importation of these elements into the country. Another phrase I used was that the bands of migrants who roam and control our streets, who beat us up and go unpunished, are the representation of the failure of the multicultural system they wanted to create. And as you can see, there is no discrimination here. It's just facts. Facts that this utopia, let's call it that, to avoid using any other terms, they wanted to create, where everybody could live with each other in Europe, of course, because that's the only place they wanted to bring them in, didn't work out. And it was only natural. And instead of saying, maybe this discussion needs to be held, we need to really think about the fact that we went overboard with our idea of importing people en masse. There was a frenzy, in my opinion, in 2015, especially in Germany, of this, open borders movement. People were like, yeah, let's have everybody here, let's save the world and stuff like that. and then they pay the consequences. Let's remember Cologne in 2015, the New Year's Eve, what happened there. And it happens every day now. That scale of sexual assault happens every day in Europe. We need to be very clear about it. We are importing rapists, criminals, killers, robbers, and we are not doing anything about it. I'm being prosecuted just because I say these things. And they want to bring me to jail. They want to bring me through years of legal battles, which, by the way, that's the real punishment. The punishment is not jail itself, because for something like this, you would either get a suspended sentence, so you would stay at home essentially, or you would do, I don't know, social works, pay a fine, whatever. That's not the real punishment. The real punishment is to tarnish your reputation by putting out articles, spewing out these articles. Oh, he is a fascist, he's a racist because he said this, and now he will go to jail for it, blah, blah, blah. And so they will cut your possibility of doing business, which is another big factor of, repression, or to, avoid you being able to connect with politicians, with parties, and all these people which are afraid because they are, I'm not going to say any derogatory terms, but politicians now really do not read the room. They do not understand that people are tired. And for these reasons, people go to the right and to the right and to the right. And when there is people like us, that we are not, we're not like other groups that push this anti-social behavior, even though they have these good ideas, they have these good positions, they essentially agree with most of what we are saying, but they are unpresentable because they love this anti-social subculture that came from the 70s, I think, this punk movement. Whilst we tend to be normal people saying normal stuff, which politicians do not say because they are afraid of everything. They just want to remain in power. And so they avoid talking about people's problems, and they avoid talking about their solutions. And remigration is a solution to mass migration.
Yeah. So the conclusion is that we are not being allowed to tell the truth in Europe anymore. And it happens in every country. And you are talking about this process of accusation, which is draining your time, destroying your reputation, but also is destroying finances of the people who are being accused. Because on the financial level, you need a lot of resources. And it's happening in United States, in Italy, the same way it goes also in Poland. And they could also not only destroy your reputation, but also ban you from starting in elections. We have a famous politician in Poland, Grzegorz Braun, who is accused at the moment, and they are trying to ban him from starting in the elections. That's the point of them.
Yeah, I mean, every time a person comes up with solutions, they try to silence them, and they try to give this, I don't know how to say that, this tag. They try to tag him
Yeah.
with either a term or, belonging to some group which is not accepted, or they try to do, this, oh, that this guy had relations with that government because he went to that event 10 years ago. They try everything they can. And the main thing about lawfare, which, by the way, I am the last in a long line of activists being prosecuted. You had Martin here, he has gone through a lot of this repression game, especially with banks. He has been banned by 160 banks as
Yeah.
of now,
Yeah.
which is just crazy to think about. And then there is, I think, the prime example of lawfare, which is Dries van Langenhoven.
Of
He
course,
has
from Belgium. Yeah.
13 legal cases against him.
Yeah.
13. That's legal, battles that drain his money. Like, he has to spend 400,000 euros until now of legal battles, of legal costs. And, you know, it's a strain on our economics because us as activists, we need money to survive, to eat. Many of us have families already, or just to be able to keep up with our political battles, we need money. And that's the point.
And
That's the
as
point. They want
Andrea,
to.
especially young political activists, they are not rich
Exactly.
people like Elon Musk who can afford a lot of
Yeah,
trials, of course.
yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
need food on the table and to pay your bills, and it's extremely damaging. But it all goes to what you said at the beginning, that the left, neo-Marxists, call them as you like, they took over the legal systems of the
Yes,
West. It's happening in United States. Donald Trump had a problem with that. He was lucky to win the elections because if he wouldn't won the elections, probably he would be completely destroyed, as he was. His punishment would be around 700 years, I think. You talked about Matteo Salvini, a very famous case. I think everybody heard about it in Europe. It's a scandal how low we have fallen. He was doing his job. He was protecting the borders. He was trying to protect the Italian people, and he was prosecuted for it. The political left is destroying this continent and our countries because the political left is responsible for the situation that Europe is in right now, and also for the mass immigration because they are the biggest advocate of it. And as you also said, why? Because they are bringing in new voters everywhere. Is it France or Italy? They are trying to do it even now in Poland.
yes, yes, exactly. That's the only way they can win because they know people are getting disillusioned by them. They are not buying the communist dream anymore. And as such, they need a new proletariat class.
Oh,
They don't have
yeah,
they
exactly.
don't have their workers anymore because they betrayed them. They betrayed everything they stood for, and they are simply saying, "Okay, I will just import others that will follow my lies. They will follow everything I say, even against the people here." And it really makes me wonder how much money and effort they spent in brainwashing people, because there is so many young people as well that are explicitly saying we need to be replaced, we need to be killed, we need to be extinct because we are colonizers, racist, blah blah blah. That's literally brainwash. And it's something that saddens me a lot to see young people just saying, "Oh, we don't deserve to live," which are taking the depression they have from living in such a corrupt and rotten society and reflecting it on themselves and their own people.
Yeah.
It's really,
Andrea, and
that's
the
really sad.
problem also is, and I think you've experienced it, they took over not only the legal systems, but also the media and the education and the schools. So
You
people
have
are
everything.
being
Are you
brainwashed
familiar
on
with
mass scale. Yeah.
Gramsci? Are you familiar with Gramsci,
Yes,
Antonio
of
Gramsci?
course, he created this process of long march through institutions. Although,
Exactly.
as far as I know, the term itself was used later in 1960s by a German
Yeah.
left-winger, Rudi Dutschke. But the process was described by Gramsci.
Cultural hegemony.
Yes.
That's what they wanted, that's what they achieved. And that's why we are being so successful, because the identitarians have been the only ones to understand that the battle is a cultural battle. It's a cultural struggle. We need to change the mentality of the people. And once you change the mentality of the people, you essentially gain power. That's the key thing. And to change the mentality of the people, you need to change the culture, which is the set of acceptable social norms that are present in a society. And we are doing that through our actions, but also through the constitution of this ethnic conscience in our people. We are saying we deserve to live. We have a land. We are native to Europe, and we deserve to maintain the lands of our ancestors, the lands of our descendants. That's what we are saying, and that's why it's so, it's getting somewhere right now, our message. And the second is the fact that we are acting upon this key, let's say, institutions in society. We are breaking the wall of silence around terms, around possible solutions by doing, stuff like the Remigration Summit, meta-political actions, banner drops, marches, and all that stuff, by popularizing, normalizing, and consolidating these ideas in the public debate. And once these ideas are accepted, we move on to the next thing until we reach eventually a point where in society everything we say is accepted. And that's another thing the left has always done. They talk about revolution, they talk about eternal, struggle against the higher forms of life or the higher forms of society until everything is amalgamated into the same level, which of course will be controlled by these people that they never will say that publicly, of course. And to get there, they have these, filters, and they want to achieve 100. They get 50 at first, but they're happy with that because from that 50 they build everything they need to get 80, and then they build everything they need to get 100. Whilst the right loses because it doesn't have this mentality, this conquering mentality, this idea of going out there not because we want to be accepted by these people which want us dead, but to win. They will do anything in their power to win, and that's why they win. Whilst the right will do anything in their power to try and be accepted by these people, which is mental. And that's exactly, going to the second subject, what I try to define in the book. In the book I wrote, Reconquista. The main subject is the idea of having a movement, an alternative, a political alternative, which does not care about this way of doing politics in the liberal system. It only cares about solving the current crisis and surviving, because we need to survive as a civilization, as people. And in order to achieve that, you need a mindset, which is essentially a heroic mindset, if you want, the classical idea. I'm really obsessed with classical literature. I only read, big classics. I'm reading the Odyssey right now after having read the Iliad. And those books, which in my opinion represent a staple of, European mindset through the ages, is that immortal glory can be obtained by heroic actions. Whilst if you want to live, the choice Achilles had to live with his family or to go to Troy and achieve this immortal glory, he chose the latter because that's the only way you can get remembered. And by being remembered, you become immortal. And that's the choice Europe has, in a different sense, of course. Either we choose to lay back, enjoy our lavish lifestyle with, phones and television and food and, all pleasures we want, and allow our society to die, or we choose the difficult path, the heroic path. We choose to go out there. We choose to make the hard choices in life, because I think a big part in our, destruction comes from the laziness that's been implanted in generations and generations of people, which didn't have to fight for their own, people, for their own culture, for anything. Modern life is just exist and you will die someday. That's the only thing that matters now. But it's going back, because in the youth, in the young people, I've noticed there is this flame inside of fighting for something. If you've noticed, there is young people fighting for the climate because they perceive the climate will end the world, will destroy the world. Then you have people fighting for, I don't know, the freedom of Palestinian peoples and all that stuff, because they do not have the sense of belonging anymore, because it was destroyed by decades of propaganda. So in my opinion, identitarianism is the solution, because it both presents the youth with this alternative, which can be heroic, which can mean fighting for something, living, being vital, and a sense of belonging to a community, to a kin, to a people, in order for you to be complete with yourself, with your being.
So you are saying that they lost their identity, in fact. That's
Yes.
also very
Yes.
important. When it comes to this
Yes.
heroic vision of life, you in Italy, you had a great 20th century philosopher, it's Julius Evola, who wrote extensively about the heroic spirit. He had a great collection of essays, The Metaphysics of War. It was one of his main subjects, and he was saying that without restoring this heroic spirit, the West will not survive. And
Exactly.
you talked about the political right, that it was defeated during the 20th century. I think one of the main reasons was that the welfare state degenerated people to some extent. The
Yeah.
political right started to saying, I'm sorry for everything. And for example, look at United Kingdom, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. What happened to Conservative Party? The, they went
Yeah.
so much to the left that there's all at the moment there's almost no difference between them and the Labour. They are so much to the left, and that's why they are losing completely, because now you have Reform UK and you have Restore UK. Yeah, that's
Which is even better. Yeah.
yes,
Both is.
definitely, definitely. And when it comes to the heroic vision of life, you mentioned Iliad by Homer. Of course, every young man should read it. I remember some years ago when I wanted to read this book, I was thinking, oh, it could be such an archaic text, it will be hard to read it, but it's full of life, in fact.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what obsesses me about the Iliad. It's so alive, like it's
Yes,
so real, it's so carnal, it's crazy that
yes,
nobody reads it today.
yes,
Nobody. Like they teach you in school about the Iliad, but they manage to make it boring,
yeah,
whilst they could just give the book to the people, to the young people, and let them read it,
yeah.
because it's so real. Again, in this world, what struck me a lot about the book was the fact that in this world where everything is, viral, it's online, it's virtual, sorry, you don't have anything that resonates within you in a deep level, and the Iliad does that because it's so real.
Yeah, and I think the good word in English would be dynamic. It's not boring at all.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah,
hits
yeah, yeah.
from Hollywood are nothing compared to it, really. It's such an alive text. And when it comes to that apologizing and Iliad, I remember one quote by Achilles, who says, "There are no pacts between lions and
Between
men."
lion and yeah, yeah,
Yes,
it's my
and
favorite quote from the book also.
yes,
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
think that's the solution for the political right, to tell the
I
modern
agree.
world and the political left there are no pacts between lions and men. I think that's the point
Yeah,
of view
I
what you're
agree
saying.
completely. And that's what I present in my book, where I try to give a definition to identitarianism in, of course, the putting it in context with the modern times, because one key aspect of identitarianism is the fact that it doesn't start from wanting to recreate something. It has this, which is something that fascinated me, which is so natural also. Yes, we want to revitalize Europe, but to revitalize doesn't mean, to take something that was the past and try to bring it to life again in the same way, because it won't happen. We want to create something new, to infuse new life to Europe. And to do that, we need new ideas, new starting points. And this cultural phenomenon, which is developing slowly, and that has been brewing for, I think, decades also in Europe, I think it's starting to grow. I think it's starting to develop and to become real. You can see it in the youth. There is this political divide, especially between right wing and left wing, and the right wing will be men, essentially young men. The left wing will be young women. But even this, people see it as a bad division and all that stuff. I don't believe it's really bad, honestly. I think that's just the manifestation of the spirit, of the natural spirit that a gender has. So yes, we are assisting to social division, political division, but what I'm also noticing, we are assisting to the rebirth of the character of the singular genders and peoples of Europe. Also, the different, peoples, the different ethnic groups, subgroups in the European, let's say, sphere are experiencing this rebirth. Especially, I come from northern Italy. Okay, if you like Italian politics, you know that North Italian divide between, from north south has been a staple of Italian politics in modern times for a long, long time. And this divide is what has defined the idea of, wait, there is, let me close the
Yes,
curtains.
please,
Let me
please.
close the curtains. Okay. So, if you're familiar with Italian politics, you know there is this north-south divide, which is economic divide, of course, because the north is productive, the south isn't that much, and it's a division also in powers and all that. But it's mainly an identitarian divide. The north has a strong identity that has been, forgotten for a long time because the country, during the decades it was united, and now it's 100 and almost 170 years that Italy has been united, which is not that long if you think about it, compared to other national states. But it was never addressed, this question, because Italy during the Middle Ages, we had the communes, the Italian communes, which were engine for Middle Ages expansion and what was it? The Renaissance and
Renaissance.
yeah, in Italian it's a bit which essentially allowed Europe to become what it became in the 1800s, the conquering power in the whole globe. And Northern Italy has experienced this identitarian revitalization along with the rest of Europe. And I think that's a good thing because people are going back to their ethnic native, belonging. And that's a good thing because that shows that people are looking for something, again, real in their lives. They're looking for real identities, not fake identities that are sold to them by by corporations or by political parties, because the young people have no identity. And so they take identities from parties, from corporations, from influencers, and they become what they want, a product, a consumer, let's say. And the LGBT movement is the biggest example for this, in my opinion. It stems from identity crisis that the young people are living, which they, reflect upon, one of the main aspects of being young, which is sexuality. And they feel this strong urge to be sexual, to express their vitality somehow. And having no identity, having also no real social interactions outside the virtual scope, they follow whatever is sold. Oh, LGBT is popular. Okay, I become LGBT now. Or, oh, Palestine is popular. Okay, I become Palestinian now. And there is nothing real, but more and more young people, especially, and it's peculiar, especially from the left, are turning towards identitarianism. I've seen that many people who are identitarian, they were left wing before, which is interesting because people on the left are very active about the protection of, you know, the self right of self-determination of peoples of whatever. They just, in my opinion, having this identity crisis, they just go towards something external because they have nothing internal to defend. But if we give them again this identity, the people will defend it because that's always been the norm. That's nature. You're made to defend the interests of your peoples. That's what you are. And as much propaganda you can consume, your nature cannot be changed. It's impossible.
Yes, global village is another utopia. That's a fact when it comes to this.
Ah, yeah.
But Andrea, I think the tragedy of the modern world, of modern Europe, lies or starts also at home because the tradition and identity is not being passed at home. And another
Yeah.
tragedy goes along. So many young people at the moment being raised in homes without fathers. And father was the leading voice to pass your identity, to pass your tradition, to pass your heritage onto you. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
big social issue.
They've destroyed the figure of fatherhood because they wanted to destroy nature. I mean, the reason we get our surnames from the father, it's it's this, you know, when there is a household and we come from Indo-Europeans and all that, you know, it was the main figure, the main political figure was the man, and it's also natural. And what passed on the, you know, also in the Iliad, you can see when they describe heroes descendants. Okay, so his father was this, his grandfather did this, blah blah blah. You can see it's a lineage of men.
Mhm.
But today this idea of lineage doesn't exist. Like if you ask any person of my age, what's your lineage? They do not know how to answer. Fortunately, I can answer because I've had a really good father and a really good grandfather, and they had in turn really good great grandfathers, blah 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 blah. So I can really make out this lineage of my, you know, my being, which gives me a place in the world, in time. I do not feel useless. I feel part of something, and that's missing in today's generation.
And that's also how the left is trying to destroy European civilization. Because if you want to destroy a culture and civilization, you attack the men first, then the civilization
Yeah,
is defenseless.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And also, they try to make the women not women anymore. They do not, you know, they try to suppress their natural nurturing, um, you know,
Instinct,
instinct.
instinct.
Yeah, and they either suppress it or deviate it towards others. And the others now are migrants. If you've noticed, the reason why women are so pro mass migration is because they're not being mothers. And not being mothers means there is this nurturing instinct they cannot satisfy. And the left has masterfully taken this instinct and directed it towards these migrants, which are presented as defenseless children, even though they aren't.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, it's genius because they're using the instinct of our people against ourselves. And we need to, you know, invert this. We need to
Yeah.
denounce this first, and we need to revitalize, to reconquest, if we want, these instincts for their correct purpose, which is to defend and to make our people prosper.
Yes. Andrea, you've published your book in Italian.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the main points, main subjects that you are writing about?
Yeah. So the book's title is Reconquista. I think it's clear what it means. Generation Remigration is the subtitle. And the main points are this, what we have talked about now. So the necessity of an alternative that can really repurpose our instinct and revitalize this heroic spirit, this, if you want, Faustian spirit inside us. Then the fact that all in the perspective of young people, of the youth, the fact that we do not have identity anymore, the fact that we are lost, the fact that we need something to belong to, and the fact that the identity is a solution to that, is the only solution to that, because nature has made us to be part of something, to be part of a lineage, to be part of some people. Then I pose remigration in the, you know, in this sense of a possible solution that could help our peoples survive for longer, even though I explicitly say that remigration can only be obtained with a cultural shift, because otherwise, it doesn't make sense. It's like keeping alive a person that's supposed to be dead. Europe right now doesn't have the mentality to survive yet. It's alive in some of us, but it's not the norm. We need to awaken this survival instinct in Europeans because they do not have it anymore. And what sense would remigration make if there is no will to survive and to come back from all the destruction that has been brought to us? And so I bring the theme of reconquest, the need for especially young people to go out there, to fight, to act until the survival instinct is reawakened in them, but also in their own people. That's the main,
Yeah. Do you have a copy of
fact of the book.
do you have a copy of the book with somewhere with you now?
No, not here, not here. No,
Okay,
not here.
I'm showing the cover on the screen. Do you plan to publish an English translation of it?
Of course, I'm working on an English translation right now, and I will, probably in the next month will be available. If not, at the beginning of next year, because I have also many projects in Italy which involve using this book, which is not a book. I try to write a manifesto that's needed in our generation, and I wanted to, make this manifesto real, essentially, and that's what I will focus on in the next months.
Yes, that's great that the Identitarian movement is doing activism, but also you are writing books. You now published your manifesto. Martin Sellner is writing books also and translating them into English. We had the regime change from the right
Yeah.
by him, and now in May there will be an English edition of Remigration, his book. So,
Yes.
so
In
great.
Italy, fun fact, in Italy, the book Remigration, for the first time, which is another victory for the Identitarian movement, has been published in, the kiosks around
Yes.
where they sell newspapers and stuff. In every kiosk in Italy, there is a copy of Remigration now that's being sold to the public.
Really? In
Yes,
Italian, yes, the translation?
yes, yes. Thousands of copies of the book from Martin
Oh,
Remigration.
I
That's
didn't know
amazing.
that. So it's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the Italians can get to know some other ideas that probably they will not find in mainstream media, I suppose, in Italy.
exactly, exactly, exactly. So
Yeah.
we are starting even to win that battle, the publishing battle.
Yes. And soon another remigration summit is coming this year in Porto
Yes,
at the end of
yes,
May.
yes. 30th of May in Porto. This time it will be, well, of course, bigger than last time. That otherwise we wouldn't have organized it. But it will also be wider. There will not only be, us and politicians. It will be activists, politicians, but we will have demographers there, which is interesting. We'll
Oh,
have some academic production from that. Martin has created the Institute for Immigration, and there is these guys from the White Papers Policy Institute that
mhm.
will do a collab. I'm not spoiling too much, I hope, but they will do a collab, and we will produce something from the summit. There will be academic level papers coming out from it. So it would be very interesting because from this summit, we want to create a basis for policy. We do not just want to talk about remigration. We want to make it real. And to do that, we also need this.
Yes. And one of the great successes of your movement is that the term remigration is so widespread everywhere. Donald Trump is using it. It's in the United States.
Yep.
It's all over Europe. So that's a great success also. So Andrea, to conclude our talk, we are the sons and daughters of European civilization, the
Yes.
greatest civilization ever built by men, at least the one that we had few hundred years ago, because now, unfortunately, we have degenerated into some kind of a caricature of what we had.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see it in Italy. You are from a city that was a city of the great Visconti and Sforza families, the great nobility leaders of
I mean,
Italy. Yes, of course.
uh,
Yeah, Visconti and Sforza. Yeah.
yes. Yes.
Yes, and unfortunately now we are in the situation like the Roman Empire was at the end of its existence.
Exactly.
We are dying out demographically. We Europeans everywhere, Italians, Polish people, Russians also, French, British, and huge waves of migration are coming. Exactly the same thing happened at the end of the Western Empire. There is one hope, I think. Rome survived another 1,000 years in another form, Byzantium, Constantinople. So not everything is lost, I hope, and the fight is going on. And as Achilles said in Iliad, there are no pacts between lions and men.
Lion.
I
Yeah.
think that's the message that we are sending to the political left that's in charge of Europe, unfortunately, at the moment.
I think I'm convinced to my core. I have no doubt and no hesitation about it. I think we will win. I think we will come back and I think we will reconquer our destiny because that's what we are made to be. We are made for this. We were born in these times to do this. My generation, especially. We also, destiny wanted us to be called the Generation Z, the last generation. And either we do it or we die trying. Anyways, we will fulfill our heroic duty and our heroic destiny.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this very interesting talk. I urge everybody who is from Italy to buy and read your book, and we are waiting for English translation, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.